Continuing on with our outstanding guest speaker series, today the TMCC Library Virtual Open Genealogy Lab is proud to present Courtney Pinkard. Courtney is the reference coordinator at the Alabama Department of Archives and History, EBSCO Research Room. She works one-on-one with visitors exploring their family history at the center and conducts genealogy workshops in-house and around the state. She supervises a team of 5 brilliant archivists. After earning her MLIS at the University of Alabama, she landed her first library gig in Rapid City, South Dakota, which entailed a cross-country move of almost 1,400 miles. Following a string of jobs in public, academic, and law libraries, she joined the reference staff at the center in November of 2017. The Alabama Department of Archives and History was founded in 1901 as the first independent, publicly funded state archives in the country. Today, it's the state's records repository, a special collections library and research facility, and home to the State History Museum. Conveniently located just steps from the state capitol in downtown Montgomery, the Archives EBSCO Research Room is a must-see for visitors who want to discover their Alabama roots. In recent years, the department has worked to expand digital access, and researchers can now view more resources online than ever before. In this presentation, she's going to examine the history of the center and dive into all the tools that are available for family historians. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Courtney.
Thank you so much for having me today. It is great to be able to speak to other passionate genealogists from around the country, and always great to make new connections with other people who care about family history research and historical research. So as Sue said, my name is Courtney Pinkard, and I am the reference coordinator here at the Alabama Department of Archives and History. And today we're going to talk about the resources that we have available here at the archives. I'm going to start the PowerPoint presentation here. So I'm just going to share my screen with you guys, and so you won't see me. You'll be seeing my PowerPoint. But we're going to talk about first some very, very broad strokes of Alabama history, because I think it's important whenever you're doing genealogical history, research, to also understand the historical context in which lived and the broad strokes of history that would have affected their experiences. So we're going to very quickly cover a whole bunch of Alabama history in just a couple slides. We're also going to talk about the history of our institution, because I think, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think it's pretty interesting too. And then we are going to dive into some resources that we have and actually do some hands-on demos. I'm going to show what some of the resources look like and how you can use them for free on our website. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the PowerPoint. I'm going to share my screen here, and then hopefully I will be able to show you guys my PowerPoint presentation. Oh, and one more thing. So I'm going to wait and take questions at the end of the presentation, and I really can't see the chat box right now anyway. All I can see is my slides. So we'll just, if you want to go ahead and type your questions in, at the end of the presentation, I will circle back around and answer those. So we can go ahead and get started. So the first Alabamians is where I'd like to begin. Alabama was first inhabited by Native Americans of the Mississippian culture. They were known for their impressive city complexes dotted with large earthen mounds. Contact with Europeans in the 1500s decimated the native population. It took many decades for the scattered survivors to rebound. When they did, they formed the groups or tribes that we're most familiar with today: the Creeks, the Choctaws, and the Cherokees. The Creeks were the largest group in what would become Alabama. They were followed by the Choctaws in the extreme western part of the state, kind of on the Mississippi border, and the Cherokees in the extreme northeastern corner of the state, sort of where our corners come together with Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. Alabama was originally part of the Mississippi Territory, and when Mississippi joined the Union in 1817, Alabama was split off and given its own territorial status. Alabama became a state in 1819, and we actually just celebrated our bicentennial this past December with a giant party here at the state capitol. And it was a really, really great fun time on December 14th. So we had a big shindig out there. The cession of native lands to the federal government, which started in the 18-teens and continued through the 1820s and 30s, opened the newly formed state of Alabama to white settlement. By 1838, all of our tribes had been removed to Indian Territory in Oklahoma, and only a few scattered and isolated remnants were left behind. White settlers poured into these newly acquired lands from Georgia, the Carolinas, Tennessee. I chose this specific map for this slide because I think it does a really good job in illustrating how the Native American tribes very quickly became surrounded on all sides by the United States. And here in the center part of the map, the upper portion of the part that's not colored in, that's the Cherokee lands, and then the bottom portion is the Creek lands, and then over on the Mississippi border, we have a small space that's cut out for the Choctaw tribe. So you can see from this illustration, which was created around 1823, so before really significant removal started, you can see how the natives, were being pressured on all sides by the white settlements, and also why the federal government had such a vested interest in removing the Native American and getting these lands and connecting the United States that was on either side of those Indian territories. Of course, it didn't take long for those who were hungry for more land and new opportunities to shift their eyes west. By the latter half of the 19th century, Alabamians were striking out for western states like Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas. Lots of researchers from western states eventually wind up at the archives looking for their Alabama roots, and we're more than happy to help them rediscover their deep South connections. Next, we're going to briefly cover the history of our archive, and then we'll talk about some of the resources that we have to offer specifically for genealogists. In 1901, Alabama established the first publicly funded independent Department of Archives and History in the United States, predating the creation of the National Archives by more than 30 years. Under the direction of Thomas McAddery Owen, our first director, office space for the archives was set up in the old Senate cloakroom in the state capitol. So yes, at one time we were in a closet. Tom immediately began collecting records, manuscripts, and artifacts that would tell the story of Alabama. In the early days, our state legislature only met every 4 years. When they were not in session, the archives used their chambers as museum space for the public to come view the collection. This is a photo of the old house chamber with archival collections that were on display. Tom always dreamed of a permanent home for the archives, but he passed away suddenly in 1920 without ever seeing his dream realized. After Tom Owen's death in 1920, the Archives Board of Trustees appointed his widow, Marie Bankhead Owen, as his successor. She would serve as director for the next 35 years and was only the second woman to head a state agency in Alabama. Marie was part of the Bankhead family, a well-known political family from North Alabama. She used her connections in the late 1930s to secure about $1 million in federal New Deal funding to construct the archives building. The central portion of our building was dedicated on November 11, 1940, as both the state archives and the state's World War I memorial building. Since 1940, 2 additional wings have been added. The archives is conveniently located in downtown Montgomery, and we're directly across the street from the Capitol building. We are unique in that from the beginning, we have been both the state archives and the state's history museum. A lot of states keep those 2 institutions separated. This allows us to communicate the history of our state in a much richer way. Our 3-tiered mission is to collect, preserve, and share Alabama's history. We are the official government records repository for the state. All public records deemed by law to have permanent historical value are housed here at the archives. We are also a private collections library, which means we collect records, letters, photographs, scrapbooks, family Bibles, manuscripts, and other archival materials from private individuals and institutions. We collect from well-known Alabamians and also from everyday people. If it tells the story of Alabama and its inhabitants, we are interested in collecting it. As previously stated, we are home to the Museum of Alabama, the state's history. We have been collecting for over 116 years and have over 500,000 three-dimensional artifacts in our collection. The Museum of Alabama was completely redesigned and reopened in 2014, and it features award-winning Smithsonian quality exhibits that tell the story of Alabama from prehistory to the present. We welcome thousands of visitors every year from Alabama and around the world. We have approximately 30,000 Alabama students visit us annually during their Montgomery field trips. And now, the most important room for our purposes today, the EBSCO Research Room, is open to the public Tuesday through Saturday, 8:30 to 4:30. We have county records on microfilm for all 67 counties, an 8,000 plus volume ready reference section of books, the largest newspaper collection in the state, and we also offer 11 public access computers with free access to Ancestry.com, Fold3, History Geo, and Newspapers.com. And to say the least, our most valuable asset would be our 6 reference archivists that are here to offer their expertise while you conduct your research. Our genealogy resources break down into 2 main categories, those that are accessible remotely and those that are only available on-site. Today we're going to focus more heavily on the remote resources, although we do hope that you'll be able to visit us in person someday. Our first set of remote resources are those that are available for free right from our website. These tools include the Civil War Soldiers Database, the 1867 Voter Registration Database, the World War I Gold Star Database, and our MAP database. And in just a second, I'm going to close down the presentation and head to our website so I can show you some of these resources in action. So we're just going to very quickly list them here, and then we'll have a little show and tell. So those are the searchable databases that are available from our website. And then we also have kind of a separate but connected site for our digital collections. And these are materials that we have physically here that we have digitized and made available online. We have digitized textual materials and various collections related to military conflicts. We've digitized the acts, journals, and constitutions of our state government. And we have a unique collection called the 1875 voter registration books that we just within the last couple months were able to digitize and make available on. Now we're going to go to our website. So I'm going to close my PowerPoint here, and I've got my websites here ready to go. So this is the Explore Our Collections page, and this is the hub of how you can get to both our catalog to search what we physically have here, as well as our county governments on microfilm, our county government records on microfilm, our newspapers on microfilm, our print newspapers, and for Leon, here's your link to the church and synagogue records right here. So we're going to take a look first at those databases that I showed you. The first one is the Civil War Soldiers Database. And what I like to tell people when I'm showing them how to use these databases, less is more. These are fairly archaic databases. They have been, if you can't tell from our website, it's an old website, and the databases themselves are also not the most modern, and so they're not very smart. And if you started to fill in every single box on this page, you will very quickly eliminate a lot of your search results. So as with most things in life, less is more. but especially with these databases that are available on our website. So really quickly, I'm just going to enter a very generic surname so we can just get some results on this. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this database. So originally, this database was not a database at all. It was a collection of physical index cards. In the early 1900s, our first director, Thomas Owen, wanted to create a master list of all the soldiers of Alabama that served in the Civil War. And so he had the staff at the archives go through all of our collections that had anything to do with the Civil War and index any names that they found. And so, as you can imagine, it was an extremely huge undertaking. It was very time consuming. And they were finding lots of different records about potentially the same person, but they didn't know that for sure. So let's take A.B. Smith as an example. As you can see, there are many, many A.B. Smiths here in the list. And let's say that you were creating the index cards in 1908, and you come across a record that has A.B. Smith on it. And then several days later, you come across another record in a different collection that has Alan Baxter Smith on it. And then several days after that, you come across yet another record from a different collection that has the name Alan B. Smith on it. Now, you're not going to be able to take the time to go back, look over your cards, and try to suss out, is this the same A.B. Smith? Is this a different A.B. Smith? So what they did is they just created a card for literally every document they found. So that goes back to the way you use this database. If you start typing in too much information into the boxes, you may eliminate a potential duplicate record for the person that you're looking for. So if you type in specifically Alan Baxter Smith, you're going to miss out on Alan B. Smith and A.B. Smith. So particularly for this Civil War Soldiers database, less is definitely more. I would prefer to have a master list and, you know, be able to figure out, okay, how many records does my person, my A.B. Smith, have in this list? But I'll click into one of these. Let's go here with A.B. Smith of Company D of the 12th Alabama Infantry Regiment. And he's got quite a bit of information. Some of the cards had a lot of detailed information on them, and some of them not so much. So this A.B. Smith, he was killed in 1864, and it looks like he was paid in 1863. And this particular information, it doesn't, sometimes you can get a citation for where this actually came from, but not always. Again, early 1900s, they didn't always include, you know, what we would necessarily include in the 21st century. But so anyway, this is just an example of one soldier's card out of many, many, many cards. And so if you have a Civil War soldier in your family, I think it would be a great idea to come to this database, put in their surname, and see if you can find any cards that will talk about their service. Next, we'll move on to the 1867 voter registration database. This is a collection that dates back to the period immediately after the Civil War, when Alabama was essentially occupied by federal forces, and they had the Union officers in each district register all male citizens over 21 years of age to vote, including African Americans. So that's one thing that is very, very interesting and unique about this resource, is that it is a document that lists African American adult males by name, potentially for the first time. And it's very, very close to the end of slavery. So I'm going to show you, I have a particular, once again, less is more. I'm just going to put in a surname here. And this is what the results look like. And this is really what you're going to get on this page is all the information that we have. These books are not very detailed, but they might help you place someone in between the 1860 and 1870 censuses. So I just wanted to scroll down. There's a particular name that I found, and it's a unique name, and he is eluding me at this time. Let's see, where are you? Okay, so this is Triton Reeves. He is an African-American man. He lives in the Portland area of Dallas County, and to date, he is the only Triton I have found. So I really loved the uniqueness of his first name, and it's always really easy to locate Mr. Triton Reeves in our Dallas County records. I'll go ahead and show you what the page image looks like, but I'm going to warn you it's not great. We did, for what it's worth, try to digitize these. The books themselves were in terrible shape, and these were digitized many years ago before we had really good access to a modern scanner. So, you know, they're hard to read, and that's why we wanted to go ahead and index them and make them searchable, because it is very, very difficult to see the information on the page. And in a minute, we're going to compare this to the 1875 voter registration books, and you will see a major difference. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our World War I Gold Star database, and this database records soldiers who were killed in action in World War I. And each card is going to be a little different. Some of them are more detailed than others. I'll show you an example. This is a young man that I did some research on. He was killed in France, and this is his card. So his name was Corb, and he was from Chilton County, Alabama, and he was killed in action on the 11th of October, 1918, which is exactly 1 month before the end of the conflict. So he was killed in a barrage of an artillery barrage on October 11th, 1918. He is buried in the Argonne American Cemetery in France, so he never made it back to the U.S. However, his older brother, Nick, also served with him in the same regiment and company, and he did make it back. He survived the war, and he made it back home, but he had to leave Corb behind in France, unfortunately. And Corb was I think he was about 19 when he was killed. His older brother, Nick, was 22. And I did quite a bit of research on these two because I was kind of investigating the area of Chilton County where they lived. And so I really got kind of attached to Corb. And just an interesting side note, because of some mix-up between his draft registration card, his service card, and the information about his death, he was listed as being a resident of 3 different counties here around Chilton County. So some records said Elmore County, some records said Autauga, and some records said Chilton, and those counties are all right there together and touch each other. But because of this, when Autauga County and Chilton County put up their World War I memorials, they left Corb off of their memorials, and you know, he had lived in all 3 counties at some point in his life. So he was not memorialized until just this past year when an Eagle Scout, as his Eagle Scout project, created Elmore County's World War I memorial, and he included Corb's name on that memorial. So just a little aside, sorry, I'm drifting off onto a tangent here, but anyway, so this is an example of what our Gold Star soldier cards look like. And finally, I wanted to take a look at our map database. If you're a map nerd like me, we really love working with maps around here. So we have our maps divided by the topic or the subject of the map, the type of map it is, really quickly, I'm going to dip into our insurance maps because I love Sanborn insurance maps. And if you're not familiar with Sanborn maps, they are a really great resource. They actually show structures within the municipal area that they cover. So we're going to look at the insurance map for Montgomery. There's an index at the front that kind of shows you which individual sheets your section of town is. So let's take a look at 32. This should be roughly, oh, it might be 35. This should be roughly where the archives would be located in 39 years. We didn't exist yet. So let's go down to 35 and see if we can see what used to be here. Okay, so here's the state capitol building. And we would have been, so Washington goes in front of our building. Adams Avenue is behind. So this is the block that our building currently occupies. And it looks like we had a Baptist church and we had several dwellings, several houses that occupied this block back in 1900. And surprisingly, they even had dwellings that went almost right up to the state capitol building, which the state capitol itself has also been expanded quite a bit since 1900. But anyway, just an example of Sanborn maps. If you ever have a chance to sit down with some, they are a great resource, and I just thoroughly enjoyed working with Sanborn maps. So next, we're going to move on to our digital collections. Again, these are materials that we physically have here in-house. We have digitized them and made the digital copy available from our website. We have a huge photographs and pictures collection. So if you're looking for photographs, I highly recommend that. But we also have digitized a lot of textual materials. And this is going to run the gamut. You can see all the different topics that are covered. You can also search by particular government agency if you know that that's what you're looking for. So here we have genealogical notes from a Bible belonging to the Holly and Sperlin families. So this is a digitized page out of a family Bible. So that's really cool. And again, it's kind of a hodgepodge. Lots and lots and lots of great resources here in the digital collections, textual materials. And I did want to just mention, when you get to the digital collections page, this is a scrolling menu here, and it just goes on and on and on. We've got a lot of collections. So, you know, you really kind of have to pay attention and keep a lookout for what you're looking for, because it can kind of get lost in this very long menu. But next we're going to talk about the 1875 voter registration books. Again, this is a very recently digitized collection. We actually didn't even know we had this until a couple years ago. My predecessor, her name was Nancy, and she actually worked here in reference for 22 years before she retired. And when we accidentally stumbled onto this collection, she said that even she had never seen these before. So these are similar to the 1867 voter registration books. They are from 75 mostly. Some of them are a little bit later. We don't have them for all counties, unfortunately, but the counties that we do have, they can be very detailed. So I'm just going to show very, very quickly a page out of Dallas County. Dallas County is where I'm from. I use a lot of examples from Dallas County, but this is just an example here of a page. And the difference between these books and the 1867 books is that we have not indexed these yet. We will at some point make them indexed and searchable. But, you know, as you can see, that the pages themselves are much more legible than the 1867 books. So you can still access the information. You just kind of have to do it on more of a browsing basis. more so than a searching a particular person's name. But what really struck us and what made us want to digitize these as soon as we found them is that in the case of African Americans, you can see this person here under race, there's a C for colored, and it will usually, over here in employer's name, unfortunately this one doesn't, but sometimes you can find someone else's name here, and that's really important because it may indicate a relationship, possibly sharecropping or something to that effect. And this can be really important for people who are researching African Americans in the Black Belt because it can help tie them back to a white family in the area that may or may not have had connections to them during the slavery period. So here we have Hamp Gandy, and it lists his employer as B.H. Averett, and so it may not pan out, but it's a lead, it's a clue. So we were super excited when we found these. They're not all as detailed because, as with most government records, it kind of depends on the temperament of the registrar who was writing this information down. Some of them are just more thorough than others. But this was a really great resource, and we digitized it just as quickly as we could because there's some really good stuff in here. Next, we're going to talk about our legislative acts, journals, and constitutions. We have digitized all of the legislative acts for 19th and 20th century legislative sessions, starting with the very first session of our legislature in 1818 and going up through 1999. We have digitized our House and Senate journals for the 19th century. And we have also digitized all of our different state constitutions, ending with our last one, which was in 1901. Yes, this is our current constitution from 1901. And from what I understand, it is the largest constitution or the longest constitution in the world. So we are still operating on that was written at the turn of the last century. We also have, in addition to other military records in the digital collections, we have these World War I service records. And these were a recent project, like a crowdsourcing project, where we had individuals come in from the community and they could volunteer to index some of these cards. So you can see here, let's see if we can find Corb very quickly. I don't recall, see, it's the confusion about where he enlisted. He may have actually, his draft card, I think, was signed in Elmore County. He listed his home address as Chilton County, and I think he actually boarded the train to go to his training camp in Autauga County. So let's see if we have a driver real quick here. Actually, we should be able to search because these have all been indexed. There we go. There's some drivers. There's Corp. Okay. Sorry, we've got some sirens going by outside. I think it's an ambulance. So if you can hear that, I apologize. But I'm in a room that's really close to the outside of the building. So apologies again. But so here is Corb's service card, and it gives you some information about his service, and you can see right there, that it states that he was killed in action on October 11th, 1918. And another just side note about the driver family, his person that's to be notified as his next of kin is John, his father. His father actually passed away the day after he and his brother registered for the draft. So I assume that the notification of his death went to one of his older brothers who was still, here in the U.S. But his next of kin is consistently listed as his father, who had passed away. So again, just kind of another side note of some of the different rabbit trails you can find yourself going down when you start getting on a roll with a particular person's story. And finally, we're going to take a look at our active military service reports. Sometimes we call these home address reports, and these they date from the 40s until the mid-60s. So they cover World War II and Korea and kind of edging into the Vietnam era. But these are just, home address reports. They're exactly what they say they are. They just give a little bit of information about the person and then list their home address. So, where should their letters or anything that's addressed to their home go? But these cover a later period than the service records for World War I, and they're kind of the closest thing we have to service records for later conflicts. All right, so that was our show and tell portion. Let's hop back in to our actual presentation. Okay. All right. Okay, so if you are a paying member of Ancestry.com, or if you have access to the library version, you can find a wealth of Alabama-related collections that we have actually contributed to them. You can view these Alabama-specific collections by clicking on the pin that's dropped into the map there on Alabama, and you can also click Alabama down in the list under the map. It's going to look slightly different on your personal subscription versus the library version, but it works the same. You can either click us on the map or click our actual link down below. When you navigate to our specific page on Ancestry, you're going to find our state censuses, various military records, certain probate court collections, a portion of our surname files, and even our state prison records. So first we're going to talk about the state censuses. Alabama conducted its own censuses in 1850, 1855, and 1866. These census records are different from most of the federal census records from this time period in that they only list the head of the household, and everyone else is represented by a tick mark or a number in a subsequent age column. This makes it much more difficult, of course, to locate women and minors. And unless they were a part of the very small population of freed people in Alabama, African Americans won't appear by name until the 1866 state census. The 1866 state census is also the first to make a distinction between the races by dividing the population schedules into white and colored sections. This example is a page of the colored population schedule from Dallas County from the 1866 census. And if you'll look at the bottom image, you'll see that most of the people on this page have surnames listed. That's not always the case this close to the end of slavery, but everybody here has a surname except for the second to last entry. And this young woman, when she was asked for her name, she said, Jane, a freed woman. And if you'll kind of follow her line over, you'll see that her tick mark is in the 10 to 20 age group. So she was probably 18, 19 years old. She was alone in her household, and she gave her name simply as Jane, a freed woman. We do have some various military records that are available on Ancestry. It's going to be primarily Civil War related because those were the records that we got asked the most for, and they were literally being loved to death. So we digitized as many of them as we could and put them online so we could put the originals in our vault and keep them safe from very loving but quite a few hands. So some of the most important collections you're going to find are the Civil War muster rolls, and we have those for most Alabama regiment companies, not all of them, but a good portion. We have Civil War pension records from both the local and state levels. We also have censuses of Confederate veterans that were conducted in 1907 and 1921 by Thomas Owen. And then we have the draft registration cards for both World War I and World War II. Just a little side note here, if you're well versed in military records, you probably already know this, but if you're just getting started with military record research, just because a soldier or potential soldier signed their draft registration card does not necessarily mean they served. So if someone finds a draft registration card for World War I specifically, I always encourage them to go to our website and use our service card collection as well to see if that person that signed up for the draft did in fact serve in the military during World War I. Ancestry has also lumped together a whole bunch of our probate court estate records into one searchable collection. These records are taken from all 67 counties around the state, but what's available is going to vary for each county. Using this link, you'll be able to search across county boundaries and in a variety of record types, including will books, loose estate case files, probate court minutes, administrator bonds, pretty much any record type that's going to be associated with the estate process. As with all of Ancestry's indexing, you do need to be careful when you rely on their search feature. These records are primarily handwritten, and Ancestry's transcriptionists are notorious for misspelling names so badly that no amount of searching will find the person you're looking for. So, you can try the search feature, but a lot of times, and depending on the record type, this is more or less feasible. But I kind of like to just browse the collections when I can, when it's possible, and not necessarily rely just on the search. And down at the very bottom of our list of Ancestry.com collections, you'll find the surname files. This collection is taken from our surname files on microfilm, and we also have additional paper-based files as well. These surname files are arranged in folders alphabetically by surname and consist primarily of various forms of clippings, newspaper, and otherwise. We've noticed some inexplicable gaps in this collection on Ancestry. A lot of times the individual, I call them slides or images from microfilm, are numbered. So you'll be following along in the sequence of numbers and suddenly you'll miss one or more numbers out of the sequence. So if you come across something like that and you feel like maybe something is missing or out of order, feel free to contact us. And we have the master microfilm that these images were taken from, and we can pull it and go look, and if there are pages missing out of the sequence, then we can give those. I can't explain what Ancestry is doing with them, how or why they've gotten mixed up, because we just sent them the microfilm and it's all in order on the microfilm, but that's just something we've noticed with this particular collection. And again, these are going to be, it's a real hodgepodge. It is what researchers have sent to the archive, that the archives has we wanted to keep it, but we didn't have a really good collection to put it in. And so this is an artificial collection that was started to collect information from family history researchers to help other researchers. So it's a real mixed bag, but sometimes you can find some really good information. All right, so now we're going to transition to talking about the records that we only have here when you come to visit us on site. Probably some of the most significant and sought after genealogical records that we have are contained in our county government records on microfilm. We have records from all 67 counties in our cabinets, and when the research room reopens, you can come in and pull as many reels as you like because they are self-serve. The types of records you'll find are going to vary by county. For instance, some counties will have a local register of births and deaths, but a lot of them don't. And the availability is also going to vary for each county because of record loss through the years. Most counties at some point have encountered some kind of flood or fire or some other natural disaster over the last 200 years, and in some cases this has resulted in a total document loss. For instance, Connecticut County has had 5 different courthouse fires in their history, and so that has resulted in basically we don't have any records for them prior to 1900. All over the years throughout, with the subsequent fires, they have lost all of their 19th century records. But then, some counties miraculously have never had a fire, and their records are intact all the way back to 1818. So there's a lot of variation on what you're going to find. For the counties that are still intact, our records are mostly probate court based, but you are going to occasionally find some circuit court records there as well. And we have a searchable database on our website. All you have to do is type in the county you're interested in, and you can get a master list of all the microfilm we have for that county. One whole side of our research room is dedicated to our ready reference book collection. We have books about individual families, military histories, histories of the whole state of Alabama, but probably the most important books for genealogists are our county-specific books. They're arranged alphabetically by the county name, and much like the microfilm, what you'll find on each county's shelf is going to vary. In general, some types of print resources that you can expect to see on any given county are going to be probate court record indexes, like indexes to marriages and indexes to wills. You may sometimes find cemetery inventories, and that's like old-fashioned find a grave, where back in the early 1900s, people would walk a cemetery and document all the headstones that they found. But of course, the problem with that is they're not going to capture those graves that are not marked. And so much like modern find a grave, if there's not a marker there, then there may be someone buried in the cemetery that doesn't get accounted for. But, for what it's worth, we have those. We have, most of the time, at least 1 or 2 local histories and reminiscences of people that maybe grew up in the area, or talk about going to their school or their grandparents' house. So you'll usually find mostly self-published reminiscences. And then you can also find military service memorials for various conflicts. Some counties, for instance, have put together a book of all of their soldiers who served in World War II, for instance. Or you might find an index of Revolutionary War pensioners for that county. So again, it's going to vary. Each county is a little bit different in what they've got in print resources. Some counties are just jam-packed full, and some counties are very sparse and only have a few books. So it's just going to kind of depend. And as I mentioned way back at the beginning of this presentation, we are the designated repository for state government records, and we actively collect the permanent records of as many state agencies as we can. We're fortunate to have administrative records for all the governors of Alabama, all the way back to William Wyatt Bibb, who was our first territorial governor. Another large and regularly consulted collection is the Secretary of State's records, which includes legislative acts, state codes, voter registration information, and of course, election files. We have the case files of state-level courts, both the Alabama Supreme Court and the Alabama Courts of Appeal, and we have some limited early records for the state prison system, but unfortunately, we don't have anything that's very recent. And finally, in addition to taking in state government records, we also collect and preserve the private records of individual Alabamians. Our collections are so many and so varied that it's kind of hard to summarize them in a few bullet points on a slide. But we've got everything from suffragist diaries to letters home from Civil War soldiers to movie contracts signed by actress Tallulah Bankhead. The list could go on and on. Of course, these collections become even more important if they pertain to your family. So if you can trace your ancestry back to someone who was relatively well known in Alabama, I would encourage you to head to our website and search their name in our catalog. You might be surprised by what you find. All right, so that concludes the presentation portion. So I'm going to close. So do we have any questions? Anybody have any questions, any comments?
Okay, while the class is hopefully asking any questions they have in the chat box, I've got a couple actually.
Okay, go ahead, Sue.
Who determines what gets saved and what does not get saved?
Well, today we have a collections review committee. Are you talking about like what we take in and what we don't take in to our collections, or?
Well, not just today, but historically as well. I mean, is there like a like you said, a committee, a collection development policy?
Yes, we do have a collection development policy, and we also have a committee. So we have a registrar, and she works for both the museum and the archives division. And so when someone approaches us and wants to make a donation to our collections, her name's Haley, she kind of gets that process going. The donation comes before a committee for review, and we review it, and then we decide, yes, it fits our criteria, it's of value to us, we'll take it, or we may say, this is not necessarily right for us, but we will usually try to find a better institution to take it. Now, if you're curious about what gets saved and what doesn't for state agencies, we also have a section here at the archives that works with state government and also local governments to help them kind of sort through what records they can keep, which ones are permanent and have historical value, and which ones are temporary. And they do that with a process called RDA, records. I just blanked on what RDA stands for. But anyway,
is it record? Is it record? Let's see, record description and access.
Disposition Authority. Thank you. It's Records Disposition Authority. So essentially, it's a document that our records management team works with the agency to create, and it just looks at every type of document they generate over the course of business, and it says, okay, this particular document, you keep it for 5 years and then you destroy it. This particular document is so important, we need to keep it forever. You bring it to us at the archives, and everything in between. So that's how state agencies and local county agencies go about deciding what is permanent and comes to us, and what they only keep for a certain period of time and then they let go.
I think one of the things that I think the class might be interested in knowing is how strong does genealogy figure into that collection development policy?
We get a lot of genealogical materials that people want to donate. And while we are not necessarily a genealogy library per se, through the years we have taken in a lot of that material. And I would say probably 80% of the visitors that we have come in are genealogists that are looking to use the resources that we talked about today. So the majority of the public that we see on any given day are not, academic researchers. They're family historians. So it has become a very big part of our institution, although it's not necessarily, you won't find it like written into our bylaws that we are the genealogical. Throughout the years, we've just kind of become sort of a hub for that kind of information. So this is a really great place, especially if you have connections from different parts of the state. You can come here and you can go to all 67 counties courthouses without ever leaving one room. So we have become like a kind of a one-stop shop for genealogists from, regardless of where their connections are in the state. They can come here as kind of a centralized location to do their research.
Wonderful. Okay, now can you see the chat? I think one of the students has asked a question there in the chat box.
Oh, sorry, I need to scroll down. Okay, so the question is, do we have land records for Mississippi County, specifically Wayne County before 1830? We do not have any records for Mississippi. Those are in Mississippi. And Mississippi, the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, they have a really fantastic collection, and they just recently opened a brand new building within the last couple years that also includes two new museums, both their state history museum, and then they have an absolutely phenomenal civil rights museum, and those two museums are connected. They share a connecting building. So I would, if you're doing research in Mississippi, I would very much encourage you to actually go to Jackson. I know it's a long way, but I think it would be very much worth your time to see their brand new archives building. They have just a really, really gorgeous. Then don't miss those two museums, especially the Civil Rights Museum is very, very powerful. Highly recommend visiting the museums while you're there in Jackson.
Now, I noticed you call your facility or your room where the library is kept is called the EBSCO. Can I assume that EBSCO sponsors the room?
Well, they made a sizable donation to our project when we constructed this wing. So the wing of the archives that the research room is located in was built in 2005. So we've got, our building has three sections. The original one, which was opened in 1940 in the middle, have a wing on the east side, which was constructed in the 1970s. And then I'm physically in the west wing, which includes the research room, and on the second floor, the Museum of Alabama. So EBSCO, the company, I'm sure you're familiar, if you're in the library world, EBSCO is based out of Birmingham, Alabama, and they made a very large donation to our building project, and in return, we named our research room the EBSCO Research Room.
Wonderful. And for the students who are listening right now, if you're not familiar with EBSCO, it's a company that sells subscriptions to libraries, and it's quite a kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Is pretty much a lot of libraries use them, and they sell access to articles like journal articles, magazine articles, ebooks, that kind of thing. So for those of you in the audience who are not familiar with EBSCO, like I said, in the library world, it's a pretty big name.
And also fishing lures. Somehow.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I'm sorry.
They sell fishing lures. So if you're a fisherman, you may be familiar with EBSCO fishing lures. So his name was, I believe, E.B. Stevens, who originally started EBSCO. He was quite the jack of all trades, and he liked to have his fingers in lots of pies and make all kinds of money. So.
Actually, I didn't know that, so that's interesting. That's very interesting. I'll actually share that with my fellow librarians. Okay, now I wanted to say that was really great advice you gave to my class about browsing through the collection rather depending on using the surname as a search because of the transcription errors. There's nothing more frustrating than thinking to yourself, I know they should be there, but they're not coming up.
Oh, yeah, yes. And, there's ways around it. Like, for instance, if I know someone's there, but the search box is not bringing it up, and I suspect a spelling error of some kind that's causing the search to not be able to catch them, I will find a neighbor or a family member, someone that's close to them geographically on the census. And what I typically do is go to the agricultural schedule and find, try to see if I can find them there. And once I find them, my target person on the agricultural schedule, I'll pick a neighbor and then go find that neighbor on the population schedule. And typically you will find your target person within, if not on that same page, fairly close. And then you get to the adventure of finding out how Ancestry butchered your ancestor's name to make it not come up at all when you searched it, 10 different ways. So that's one time I was searching for a family whose surname was, I believe it was West, like the direction, W-E-S-T. And for the life of me, I could not find these people. And when I, used kind of a cluster research method to finally track them down, the I'm sure, very sweet person who did the transcription of that page actually transcribed their surname as Omaha, like the city, Nebraska. So somehow we got from West to Omaha. And of course, there's no way I could have ever written a search for West that would have made Omaha come up. It just would have never happened. So that's just an example, of how sometimes you have to take a circuitous route thanks to Ancestry.
Okay, and now Randall just raised his hand through the chat box. Randall, did you want to ask a question by just unmuting your microphone? Is that why you raised your hand? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like.
No, that was a mistake. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Then go ahead and mute your microphone again and we'll go on. Okay, so let's see here. Oh, I wanted to ask, do you still have the original source records of the soldiers database that the database was, extracted from?
Yes, in a lot of cases we do. There are some cards that reference I want to say it's the second auditor's records of the Confederate States of America. However it's phrased, those are records that we don't physically have here in our building. And we are unsure about how our staff got that information from those records, because those are Richmond, or maybe they're at NARA. Either way, we don't physically have those records of the second auditor here. So we're really not sure how that happened, but for the most part, our service cards are taken from the muster rolls that we have, and we have the originals of those. They're taken from pension records, from those Confederate censuses that were conducted, early in the 1900s. And those kind of various state level documents that we do physically have here in the building.
Okay, and then I have another question. On the voter registration ones, the ones that you showed us in your presentation, right off your website, the one that had the very light copy, you were mentioning how, it wasn't really digitized with the really high quality back when they were originally done.
Yes.
Are you able to download those images and then be able to put them into your own photo editor on your computer and darken them so you can read them better?
You could certainly try. I've never done that because, the information that's on the index, or that the information that's presented in the database when you search, that's all there is. It's just a name and a location and race. So that's, you get all the information that you're going to get from that record type from the searchable database. Now, if you just wanted like an image of it, maybe to add your family tree on Ancestry or something like that, I think you can. What I would probably do is screenshot it, and then, you can try to manipulate it that way. But, again, the original is just so poor. I don't know if you'll have a whole lot of luck going that route. The actual books themselves were not in great shape. And so you had kind of a degraded original book, a not really great scanning system, and it just hasn't aged very well. So the originals, the images themselves are kind of just problematic, unfortunately. But at least we were able, when they were still legible, we were able to capture the information from them and, kind of present that in a searchable way. And hopefully we would like to do another kind of crowdsourcing indexing project for the newer voter registration books, but we use a tool called From the Page to do our transcription projects, and it just hasn't quite progressed to the point that it can handle multiple entries on a single page like we have in those voter registration books. But we're working with the company. We really want to be able to do that, and hopefully before too long we will be able to also index those books as well and make them searchable from the website too.
So there's no plans then to rescan the book that's very, very light with newer equipment, because that's not going to make a difference.
No, not. I don't know that we would ever invest the time in rescanning those, because we have captured all the information that you can get from them. So we've got a lot to digitize.
I can imagine. Oh my gosh, I can imagine.
So I think we kind of feel like we have preserved the offerable information from the document. Although the actual image of the page is not ideal, we at least have a way to access the information.
Okay, understood. Okay, now on your history digital collection, do you have the originals of those as well?
Yes, yeah, those are pretty much all things that we have the physical copy here in our collection.
Like the family Bible pages and all that?
Yes, so there are, when you get toward the bottom of that big long list, there are a few collections there that are like partner collections where we have worked with another institution kind of as a partnership. Like we digitize their materials and they take the materials back, but then we have a digital copy accessible from our website. So there is a little bit of that, but pretty much all of the main collections that you'll see on there, they are taken from the physical collections here at the archive.
Thank you. Okay. Now, the one thing that really fascinated me are those home address cards. Mm-hmm. Who actually originally produced that record set? I mean, was it the military? Who actually produced it? Was it the post office? Who did it?
For those, I'm going to open it up real quick again, real fast. I'm not as well versed with those as I am with the service cards, because they are also kind of a relatively new collection that we have digitized but not had a chance to index. So yeah, that's what I thought. So these were actually generated by our selective service boards here in Alabama. So they would have been, your local board would have been the one that would have created this card for you. And we actually have quite a bit of material from the local selective service boards here in Alabama. When they closed the selective service board here in Montgomery, which was kind of the main selective service board for the state, when they closed in 1975, they gave us all of their copies of DD-214. And so, as if you're familiar with military records, there was a terrible fire at the Personnel Records Center, and just a huge document loss of military records. And so we actually have copies of DD-214s that were destroyed by that fire, so they don't exist anywhere else. Our DD-214 collection starts in 1939, so right at the beginning of World War II, and goes up through 1975. So we capture World War II, Korea, and pretty much Vietnam. And it's going to depend on the person. In order for us to have a DD-214 for them, they have to have been a citizen of the state of Alabama. They have to have enlisted here. And then, the DD-214, of course, is issued when you separate from the military. So the person will have to have separated prior to 1975 for us to have a copy of their DD-214. And even then, it's not complete. Just as for instance, my husband's father served in Korea. He was from Alabama, born here and grew up here, raised here his whole life. But we don't have a DD-214 for him. I can't explain that. He served basically the entire Korean conflict. He was overseas. And so I don't know why we don't have this DD-214, because he meets all the criteria and should be there. So it's not 100%, but it is an option, especially if the soldier has unfortunately fallen into that group where their DD-214 that's on file with the federal government was destroyed by fire.
Wow, as a daughter of my father served in Korea as well as in World War II, and he was a victim of the fire. So, wow, that's exciting. I wish I had an ancestor, who served in Korea or in World War II that came from Alabama, because I would really tap that resource. Oh gosh, I'm almost envious. Oh gosh. Okay, and then as far as your knowledge is concerned, what records that are you aware of that have been lost for the state of Alabama that might be important to genealogists?
I wish so badly that we could find our earliest censuses. Of course, when a territory wanted to become a state, they had to meet a certain threshold for their population, so they had to take their own census, and then they would submit that to the federal government as proof that they had enough people to become a state. And so Alabama is no different. I believe it was around 1818, they conducted a census of everybody that was here at that time, and then they sent those results on to the federal government to say, hey, let us in. We have 60,000 plus people, or however much it was at the time. We are unable to locate that original census, the original population census that was taken to verify that we met the threshold for becoming a state. Back in the 1950s, there was a big, large search mounted here and in Washington for it. They couldn't find it. When we were getting ready for the bicentennial, we looked again. I was part of that search, and unfortunately, it has been lost. We cannot locate it anywhere between here and Washington, D.C. But I wish so badly that we did have it, because it is such an important and foundational document for our state. And also, unfortunately, we just have a very small fragment of the 1820 census, which was the first kind of official federal census that we were a state for. We have just a small portion of a handful of counties for 1820. And so we don't really get represented in census records until 1830, although we became a state in 1819. So I would say definitely that first 1818 census that counted us for statehood, and then also whatever else happened to the rest of the 1820 census that we don't have.
Wow, that's a tragedy. That just breaks my heart. Gosh. Okay, now, I'm sure most of my students are most interested in, records of the past. But, one of the things I kind of, try to instill in the class is, today, we're the ones doing the research, but 100 years from now or 200 years from now, it's going to be our descendants and our extended family members who are doing research in the future. So what are for instance, I know a lot of local societies, historical societies, genealogy societies. When you write a letter to them on a particular surname and they help you do the research on that particular surname, a lot of these organizations keep surname files where they keep those letters, filed. So for future generations, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, people will know who is inquiring on their family. Do you do the same thing? I imagine your organization must get tons of letters from all over the world, asking for research help on their ancestors there. Do you keep those for future reference?
So that's actually what you can find in our surname files. Those letters, directed way back in the day to our directors, and then more recently, to just staff asking for information. That's what's been tucked away a lot of times in our surname files. And you can even find correspondence like back and forth between our staff member and the researcher, and you'll see kind of their conversation going back and forth. Today, we operate by research requests, and those are not considered a permanent record anymore. We keep a copy for several years, but they're not permanent. We still add to the surname files, but it's more so what individuals contribute to us. So, for instance, we'll have a researcher, they'll finish their work, and they will forward on a copy of their notes to us, things like that. So that's kind of what we use the surname file for today, as sort of a collection where we can put the information about specific families, in case another researcher comes in and says, give me everything you have about the Smiths in 100 years. But we don't really keep our research requests are not considered permanent records anymore under our RDA for the state.
Okay, and I think there's a couple more questions in the chat for you if you want to look at, or you can ask, I can repeat them if you'd like, or you can look at them directly, whichever is most convenient.
I think it was just the one question from Leon about other states having copies of DD-214s, and okay. I haven't heard of any other states that have that. That we got ours is just a big coincidence. The local selective service board was shutting down. They had all these boxes and boxes of, they're not even the original DD-214s. They are the carbon copies. So they like pressed through, and the original, I guess, went to the soldier, and the service board kept the carbon copy backing. So that's actually what we have. And they needed somewhere to put all that, and some just brilliant person here at the archives said, oh, give it to us, we'll take them. And there's actually a story, kind of a myth, an urban myth that you would sometimes hear around the archives, that those boxes were actually thrown out on the curb, and one of our archivists ran down the street and saved them from the curb. And that's not actually what happened. It was a formal donation to us. It went through the whole process. We accessioned them as part of our collection. So it's not as romantic as rushing down to the curb and saving them. But it's really, really great, and really just a coincidence that we wound up with them at all. But it has turned out to be just a fantastic resource, especially once the fire happened.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm so thankful for that. One last question I have on the surname files. Are those are those vertical paper files, or what are they?
Yes. Yeah. So vertical file, we have other vertical files as well. So the surname files are vertical files about people. We also have vertical files that are organized on topics. And so, we have a vertical file that's Alabamians at War, and that's where we have created a vertical file about military conflicts in the state. And then we have a vertical file that is by county. So each county has its own set of boxes and folders in that vertical file. So the surname files are vertical files about people. And they started right when we began in 1901, And the very oldest paper vertical files, we microfilmed those and put them in storage in the vault because they're the oldest and they're the most fragile. So that's what's on Ancestry. The ones that were microfilmed and given to Ancestry are our oldest set. But we do have more recent ones. I feel like the ones on Ancestry might kind of start to peter out maybe around the 40s or 50s, but then it picks back up with paper-based files, and, you know, we're still adding to it even today. So, you know, those that you can access online are the oldest, but we've got lots more where that came from here at the archives.
And all these vertical files are accessible by anybody who visits.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. You can actually, I'm going to share my screen again real quick and show you how a really easy way that you can access our vertical files online. So let me go back to our website. This link right here, vertical files, these are finding aids for all of our vertical files. So general is just very, very high level topics. County is, again, alphabetical by county. And there's topical folders within the county. So you might have Montgomery County dash churches, Montgomery County dash cemeteries, and so on. Alabamians at War covers most of the conflicts that Alabama's been around for, and some of them that happened before. So there's some American Revolution stuff in there. We actually pulled out Civil War specific information because it is such a sizable portion. So we gave it its own vertical file. Down here at the bottom, you'll see the surname files. So we have 664 reels of microfilm of those older records. And then we have, this says 7 cubic feet of paper files, but, you know, we're continually adding to that. And I would be surprised if that information isn't taken from when this website was created back in the early 2000s. And it was, I'm sure it's a lot more, many more cubic feet of paper files. And so, you know, again, that surname file, that vertical file is really a hodgepodge of things that we just sort of collected throughout the years. But you can take a look at any of these finding aids, and, you know, we will happily pull any of the boxes that you're interested in seeing when you come to visit us.
Wonderful. Okay, and unless the class has any other questions, my final question is, how does my students get a hold of you to help, you know, to have your office help them with their research?
So if you would like for us to conduct research on your behalf, we have a form that you can fill out online, and you just basically give us all the information you have about someone. If you have a particular question that you're trying to answer, you know, definitely include that on the form, and then our staff member will take that information and go to the relevant records and, you know, see what they can find, and whatever we find, we'll make copies and send it to you. If you just have a general question about, you know, what we have here, sections, just kind of wanting to see what we've got, you're welcome to email me directly. Or we also have, if you would rather, we have a generic reference.archives email address that goes to one of our other archivists. He checks that regularly. So, you know, I would, if you have and of course you can always call. We're here, you know, we're not open to the public right now, but all of our archivists are here in the building. They're at their desks. They're ready to work. So you can always, you know, give us a call if you have a question about something, or you can, you know, email us. We will do our best to help you out, to figure out, you know, do we have what you need? Is there somewhere else that you need to go? You know, if you have a question about research, we can we're all pretty knowledgeable, so we can do our best to help you out.
Okay, and then one of the classes asking, can you, if you can have a moment, could you show us on the website where the form is located?
Sure, yep, so let me share my screen again. Okay, so on our website, so first of all, I don't think I showed you our homepage. This is our homepage. We are working on updating our website. We're going to get a brand new website, and it's gorgeous, and I'm so excited, but this is what we've got for now. So if you want to submit a research request, you need to go to the research tab up here at the top, and then it's going to be under reference services, the research request form. We've got some other links on this page. Here, let me hide this. But this is basically everything you can get, you know, that's research room related is going to be on this page. So there's the research request form. If you are interested in getting something digitized, or if you need like a higher resolution copy of something from our digital collections, you can order that here. We participate in interlibrary loan in a very limited way. So if you are, you know, a student and you wanted to get, we really only interlibrary loan newspapers at this time, our newspapers on microfilm. But we've got a huge collection. So, you know, if you need a newspaper, you might be able to interlibrary. And, you know, we, like I mentioned, we periodically offer genealogy workshops too. And thanks to the pandemic, we've had to start kind of offering those virtually instead of being able to welcome people into our building. But that's great because we record them and put them on our YouTube channel, and anybody can see them. So, you know, it's kind of, it's a little bittersweet. I really enjoy, you know, working one-on-one with students and answering questions in person, but when you are able to put something online like that, you broaden your reach so much. And we've really had a very good response to the workshops. We had originally planned a spring series of workshops here physically at the archives, and we wound up having to do most of those as virtual workshops, and we've gotten a lot of really good feedback on those. So I'm going to stop.
Now, Courtney, are you opening those workshops? I know with our class, you know, originally our class was restricted to only the people who came to my class. But when the virus hit, you know, the school said, you know what, let's just help not only our community, but communities around the country. So we're actually allowing anyone to come into our webinars, you know, from anywhere in the country. If they just, you know, simply contact me, I give them the link to join, you know, every Friday, because we want to be as inclusive as we can. Especially during this time of shutdowns where, you know, we're all kind of helping each other. Is your facility doing the same? Do you open those webinars up to everybody?
So far, we're not doing them live, not like in this format. What we've been doing is we've been recording the presentation that we would have presented, you know, here in our facility. So we haven't done any live. Our museum staff have done some live, you know, webinar format. We have just recorded them and then placed the recordings online to YouTube. I'm assuming this is, you know, us being closed to the public is probably going to go on through the end of the year. We do have that fall series that's coming up, and we might explore some of that, you know, potentially maybe doing a live webinar format that we record. But when we were all in work from home mode, when we had to do the spring ones, and so we just kind of felt like it was better, since we were all at our houses, to just kind of, you know, record those and then put them up at a later date. But now that we're back in the building, you know, we kind of have access to the equipment and so on that we could more easily do a live webinar format. If we did that, then I anticipate that, you know, anybody could join us for that. We would more than likely, you know, advertise it both on our social media pages and on the website, definitely on social media though. And, you know, I can't imagine that we would restrict Unless there was some sort of technological reason, we'd have to restrict the number of attendees to the webinar. But, if at all possible, I would like to make it open to anyone who wanted. But either way, it would be a recording that would eventually be posted to our YouTube channel as well.
Okay, great. Okay, then I do have one last question, only because it kind of sprouts off another question. Do you have a moment to show us your YouTube channel, just to show us how to find it and how to access those videos?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that we have a link just right from the homepage, little button. So there's YouTube. The internet's a little slow on this side of the building, but that should just bring our YouTube channel right up. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, I see it.
Here's our YouTube channel, and we have curated some playlists here. So we've got our genealogy playlist, and then we have a monthly program, a food for thought program here, where we have speakers come in. We record those. Those are on there. And our most recent kind of push has been for suffrage, women's suffrage. And so our museum side has been kind of focusing on specific Alabama women, and they've been doing videos, kind of video bios of those specific Alabama women that were really important throughout history.
Well, that's really convenient to be able to go right from the web page right into YouTube. That's wonderful. Okay, well, let's see if I'm going to scroll down here, and I don't see any other questions. I've got a lot of people saying thank you for a wonderful webinar. So unless the class has any last minute questions, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you on behalf of the class and our school for your time today and your expertise. It was much appreciated. And once again, thank you for letting us record today's session, and we will be putting that on our school YouTube channel as well. So very much appreciated. And let's see, I'm just giving it a couple more seconds to see if anyone is going to have any questions. No, everyone's just saying thank you, thank you, thank you.